Welcome to Wisdom of the Bible channel. Elon Musk, known for his curiosity and disruptive innovations, has recently focused on the transatlantic slave trade and its impact on African descendants in the Americas. He claims that many of those enslaved were not just Africans, but descendants of ancient Israelites. Musk's research spans historical records, biblical texts, anthropology, and African oral traditions. He argues that mainstream history has overlooked the true identity of these enslaved people. According to him, European and Arab slave traders specifically targeted groups with Israelite heritage, groups that still carry cultural links to ancient Hebrews. If true, this could reshape our understanding of African and Jewish history. For centuries, African oral traditions have preserved stories of Israelite descent. Tribes like the Igbo of Nigeria, the Ashanti of Ghana, and the Yoruba have long claimed ties to the lost tribes of Israel. Their histories speak of ancient migrations from the Near East and practices mirroring those in the Hebrew Bible. Some scholars believe that after the destruction of the First and Second Temples in Jerusalem, 586 BCE and 70 CE, Israelites fled to Africa, where they maintained their heritage. Archaeological and linguistic evidence supports these claims. Words in Igbo and Yoruba resemble Hebrew terms, and customs like male circumcision and dietary laws align with biblical commandments. Pre-colonial African religious practices among these groups often included monotheistic elements, unlike the polytheism of neighboring tribes. Musk's research highlights how European slavers disproportionately targeted these groups during the slave trade. If true, slavery was not just about labor, but also an attempt to erase an entire identity. Musk delves into historical slave records, pointing to evidence that many enslaved Africans bore Hebrew names, practiced circumcision, and followed dietary customs similar to those in the Torah. He argues that European traders didn't randomly capture Africans, but targeted specific ethnic groups with Israelite traditions. Records from Portuguese and Spanish slavers in the 1500s and 1600s show that many enslaved individuals came from regions with Jewish or Israelite customs. Early European explorers and missionaries in Africa also described communities with unique cultural traits, such as refusing to eat pork, observing a Sabbath-like rest, and adhering to moral codes resembling Mosaic law. Musk suggests these were not quirks, but evidence of a preserved Israelite heritage that slave traders sought to destroy. He claims that slave traders knew the identities of those they captured. Portuguese, Spanish, and Arab traders, often working with Middle Eastern and North African intermediaries, identified and targeted specific groups. Musk argues that these intermediaries recognized the Israelite identity of these communities and played a role in their enslavement. Some historical sources suggest that Jewish converts to Islam in North Africa were involved in the slave trade. These traders, Musk believes, may have recognized the customs of the groups they sold into bondage. While the slave trade was driven by economic motives, Musk argues there was also an effort to strip these people of their spiritual and historical identity. By removing them from their lands, banning their customs, and erasing their heritage, the slave trade did more than enslave individuals. It severed a people from their past. If Musk's research is accurate, the implications are profound. It suggests that the descendants of the Israelites were not confined to the Middle East and Europe, but were also present in West Africa before being scattered again through the slave trade. This challenges long-held assumptions about the Israelites' descendants and raises questions about why this history has been obscured. Was it an oversight, or was it deliberately suppressed? Musk's claims have sparked heated debates. Some scholars agree that the slave trade disproportionately targeted certain African groups, but caution against drawing definitive conclusions without more evidence. Others dismiss Musk's claims as speculative, arguing that the historical record is too fragmented to support such bold assertions. Regardless, Musk's work has reignited interest in the connections between Africa and ancient Israel. His research has prompted scholars, theologians, and historians to re-examine these links. Whether his findings are proven or not, Musk has sparked a conversation that challenges conventional narratives and forces the world to confront a largely untold history. Musk's research suggests that the forced removal of black Israelites was not just about economic exploitation, but also a calculated effort to erase their cultural, religious, and historical identity. While all enslaved Africans endured horrors, Musk argues that black Israelites suffered a uniquely devastating fate: spiritual and cultural annihilation. His findings indicate that these individuals, recognized for their Israelite heritage, were deliberately targeted and systematically stripped of their identity. One of the most insidious aspects of slavery was the destruction of cultural and religious heritage. Enslaved Africans were denied the right to speak their languages, practice their faiths, or maintain their customs. Musk suggests that for black Israelites, this suppression was even more severe, an orchestrated attempt to sever their connection to their biblical lineage. Historical records show that enslaved Africans were often forcibly baptized, given European names, and punished for practicing their original beliefs. Musk highlights accounts of slaveholders banning the Old Testament, fearing its stories of deliverance would inspire rebellion. The parallels between the biblical Hebrews and enslaved Africans were too powerful to ignore, leading plantation owners to suppress any religious narratives that could fuel resistance. Evidence of this erasure can also be seen in the suppression of Hebrew cultural markers. Enslaved Africans who practiced circumcision were often prohibited or ridiculed. African spiritual leaders who tried to preserve their customs faced severe punishment or execution. Musk argues this was not just about assimilation, but a strategic dismantling of a people's identity. His research also sheds light on the role of Middle Eastern and North African traders in the slave trade. While European powers benefited from the system, they relied on African and Middle Eastern intermediaries who knew the identities of those they captured. Musk cites records showing that these traders were familiar with the customs and religious practices of the people they enslaved. Some scholars point to Jewish converts to Islam in North Africa who participated in the slave trade. Musk suggests these individuals may have recognized the Israelite heritage of the enslaved and contributed to their erasure. By the time these captives reached the Americas, their past had been obliterated. They were given new religions, names, and histories that denied their true origins. Musk argues this was not an unintended consequence, but a calculated effort to erase an entire people from history. The long-term impact of this erasure extends beyond the individuals enslaved. Musk suggests that the forced removal of black Israelites and the destruction of their identity created generational trauma that persists today. Descendants of these enslaved people grew up in societies that denied them knowledge of their true origins, framing them as disconnected from their ancestral roots. One of the most damaging consequences, Musk argues, is the loss of self-determination. Many African Americans today are unaware of their potential Israelite ancestry due to centuries of historical suppression. This deliberate rewriting of history has left them disconnected from their heritage, making it harder to reclaim lost traditions and spiritual practices. Yet Musk sees resilience in African American culture, evidence of a people struggling to piece together fragments of a past that was systematically taken from them. His findings have sparked controversy, with some historians dismissing his claims as speculative, while others see them as a step toward uncovering hidden truths. Regardless, his work has reignited interest in re-examining the history of the transatlantic slave trade and the identities of those forcibly removed from Africa. Musk calls for more research into the origins of enslaved African populations, urging scholars to take oral histories and cultural traditions seriously as historical evidence. If his theories hold merit, they could reshape how history is taught and understood. His research challenges narratives that separate African history from biblical history, suggesting that the descendants of the Israelites are far more widespread than traditionally acknowledged. While his findings remain debated, they open the door to a larger conversation about the lost heritage of millions of African Americans and the possibility of reconnecting with their ancient roots. Perhaps the most controversial aspect of Musk's revelations is the question of why this history remains largely unknown. Despite extensive studies on the transatlantic slave trade, the idea that many enslaved Africans were descendants of ancient Israelites is almost absent from mainstream education. Musk has taken to social media and public forums to demand answers, challenging historians, educators, and institutions. He argues that there has been a deliberate effort to suppress this knowledge, raising concerns about historical omission and the erasure of Black Israelites from global consciousness. Musk claims that mainstream education has excluded the role of Black Israelites in the slave trade. While schools teach about the horrors of slavery, the focus is often on the dehumanization and economic exploitation of Africans rather than their specific identities. Musk suggests this narrative has been intentionally generalized, reducing enslaved Africans to a monolithic group. He argues that this omission is part of a broader effort to erase the historical connection between Africans and the Israelites of the Bible. Historical records, Musk claims, show that many enslaved Africans bore Hebrew names, practiced Israelite-like customs, and followed spiritual traditions aligned with biblical teachings. Yet this information rarely appears in school curricula. He points out that history textbooks emphasize the economic and social impact of slavery, but overlook the personal histories and identities of the enslaved. This oversight, Musk argues, is not just academic negligence, but a calculated suppression of historical truths that could reshape discussions on identity and heritage. Musk also highlights an inconsistency in how history is taught. While biblical history covers the persecution and diaspora of Jewish communities in Europe and the Middle East, the possibility that the lost tribes of Israel included Africans who were later enslaved is dismissed or ignored. This selective approach, he contends, raises questions about who controls historical narratives and why certain truths are deemed inconvenient. In response, Musk has called for a comprehensive overhaul of history education. He insists that students deserve to learn the full truth, including the possibility that Black Israelites were specifically targeted during the slave trade. He argues that omitting this history deprives African descendants of their rightful heritage and perpetuates cultural disconnection. His stance has ignited debates, with some supporting his call for historical revision and others accusing him of promoting speculative theories. Musk envisions an education system that prioritizes transparency and factual accuracy over political convenience. He suggests that history curricula include overlooked perspectives, such as African oral histories, slave records documenting Hebrew customs, and accounts from European traders who encountered Israelite-like groups in Africa. By incorporating these sources, he believes schools can provide a more complete account of history. However, Musk's push for reform has faced resistance from academic institutions and historians who argue that his claims lack sufficient evidence. Critics contend that while some West African tribes exhibit Israelite-like traditions, the connection to biblical Israelites remains speculative. They caution against rewriting history based on theories not widely accepted in academia. Despite skepticism, Musk's challenge has sparked a larger conversation about gaps and biases in historical education. His arguments resonate with those who believe mainstream history has marginalized the identities of Black people beyond their role as enslaved individuals. Supporters argue that, whether or not Musk's specific claims are proven, the broader issue of historical suppression remains valid. History has often been written by those in power, and inconvenient truths are frequently buried. Musk's demand for historical truth extends beyond education. It touches on questions of identity, heritage, and cultural reclamation. If Black Israelites were disproportionately targeted during the slave trade, millions of African Americans today may unknowingly be descendants of the biblical Israelites. This possibility has profound implications for religious, social, and cultural identity, particularly for African-descended communities seeking to reconnect with their roots. Musk's challenge also brings attention to the issue of historical gatekeeping. Who decides what is taught and what is omitted? If educational institutions have suppressed knowledge about Black Israelites, what other aspects of history have been altered or concealed? His call for transparency and inclusivity in historical education has encouraged renewed interest in alternative narratives, prompting scholars and researchers to re-examine the links between African heritage and biblical history. Ultimately, Musk's challenge is not just about uncovering forgotten history, but questioning the framework through which history is constructed. By demanding that historical narratives reflect a fuller truth, he has ignited a debate that extends beyond the classroom, forcing society to confront how history has been shaped, controlled, and at times deliberately obscured. Elon Musk's investigation into the transatlantic slave trade has reignited a conversation many believed was settled. His research suggests that Black Israelites were not just victims of slavery, but its primary targets. If true, this revelation compels us to reconsider everything we know about the African diaspora, challenging assumptions about the identities of those forcibly removed from their homelands. Musk's efforts to bring this hidden history to light have been met with both admiration and outrage. Some see him as a visionary, unearthing suppressed truths, while others view him as a controversial figure, venturing beyond his expertise. Regardless, Musk has forced a critical reassessment of dominant narratives surrounding slavery. If his claims hold merit, history has not only failed Black Israelites by enslaving them, but further wronged them by erasing their identity from collective memory. The pressing question now is, will the world confront this hidden truth, or will it continue to look away? Elon Musk investigates the slave trade. Were Black Israelites the true victims of oppression? Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur known for his work in space travel, artificial intelligence, and electric vehicles, has turned his attention to one of history's most painful subjects, the transatlantic slave trade. His investigation has led to a startling claim. Musk suggests that the slave trade was not just about economic exploitation, but was a targeted effort to sever Black Israelites from their heritage, identity, and biblical past. This revelation has sparked intense debate. Some historians dismiss it as revisionist history, while others see it as uncovering a long-buried truth. For generations, the slave trade has been portrayed as a tragedy affecting all Africans equally. But what if that wasn't the full story? What if Black Israelites were deliberately targeted, enslaved, and erased from history? As this investigation unfolds, we invite you to join the conversation. Do Musk's findings challenge conventional history, or are they part of an effort to reclaim a forgotten past? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more discussions on history, identity, and untold truths.
Hello, dear viewers. Thank you for watching our channel, Wisdom of the Bible. I personally invite you to subscribe to our channel. It supports us and helps us create more videos. Thank you, and God bless you.